Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on with the Haikyuu fanfic Reach Up for the Sunrise by UselessProtagonist, and today I'm going to be reading chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 3, Friction. Tsukishima starts to feel, and not for the first time, that the sympathy he had shown to Hinata was a mistake. Tsukishima didn't enjoy being, for lack of a better term, an asshole. He understands how unapproachable he can be, though admittedly he doesn't do much to improve upon himself to be considered more likable by others. He can be nice, but it's rare, and honestly he feels like this kindness might have been wasted on Hinata. So, Hinata starts, drawing the vowel out as he traces circular patterns across the store's countertop. Why did you quit volleyball? He tries to frame it as innocuous and casual as possible, as if it's his first inquiry on the subject and not the 100th. Tsukishima lets out a slow exhale, tapping against spines of books he's only half accounted for. Shouldn't you be going to practice or whatever it is you're dressed for like that? It's not a question, but more of a warning, the way the words curl on Tsukishima's tongue, making a point to let his irritation show. Disregarding the first time, all the other times he's given this response the past few weeks, Hinata doesn't appear fazed by his tone or obvious distaste of the subject. He simply twists his mouth to the side and looks down at the counter, usually followed by Hinata, either skimming back through the bookstore or leaving altogether with just a simple goodbye with his parting. At times, Tsukishima feels the redhead only comes in to ask the question. Well, he's not getting it. Not anytime soon. Another mistake Tsukishima finds he's made is telling any of this to Aketeru. It happened on one of the first few days Hinata would pop in for his questioning, where Tsukishima happened to be particularly grumpy due to staying up later than usual to finish an assignment, and Tsukishima wasn't even trying to hide his irritability when he came in the door. Uh-oh, Aketeru said immediately as he saw him, the telltale words he always said whenever Tsukishima was upset. However, like always, his words were appropriate for the situation, but the tone and grin that accompanied them surely were not. What's up? You seem to be grimacing more than usual. Why does everyone worry about my business? Tsukishima snapped back, dropping his bag at the hallway without much care. Why can't you just leave me alone? Aketeru made no move to stop him as he pushed his way past him through the small hallway. In retrospect, if he really wanted to avoid a conversation, he would have promptly retreated to his room, but in that moment he headed towards the kitchen. And Aketeru followed close behind. So you don't want to talk about it? Not really, Tsukishima said, softer this time but still with a slight edge. But that's the problem, he continues, though mostly musing to himself rather than talking to his brother. He still wants to talk to me about it. Who? Aketeru asked innocuously. This guy at my work, Tsukishima grumbled, taking a glass out of the cupboard just to have something to do with his hand. He works with you? No. Tsukishima groaned, and he felt the compulsion to vent his frustrations and, not seeing the harm in it at the time, told his brother the events of the last few weeks, and once he did, Aketeru began to laugh. Is this really that amusing to you? Tsukishima asked bitterly, arms crossed. Aketeru had stopped laughing, and now was just casting an amused grin his way. I don't see what the big deal is. Why can't you just tell him what you told me? He asked. Tsukishima cast his gaze to the floor. He'd almost forgotten the talk that he and Aketeru had had a few years ago about why exactly he didn't feel the need to give it his all for a sport he wasn't even sure he liked. He hadn't really talked about it to anyone else, not even Yamaguchi. However, this was different. Hinata was... It was just complicated, a messy tangle of emotions he would rather ignore than try to straighten out. It's none of his business, Tsukishima growled, but Aketeru was still smiling as he said, Maybe it is, considering how hung up on him you are. What? Tsukishima blurts, his voice coming out too fast to cover the underlying horror in his tone and irritable denial until he catches himself. I am not. He doesn't even wait for Akateru's response before eventually retreating to his room. Surprisingly, Hinata doesn't come back to the shop for a little over a week. A part of Tsukishima is appreciative, relieved even, that there is a lack of another person's presence to drain him mentally. And then there is this part of him that is aware of the calm before the storm tension lingering along with Hinata's absence. Tsukishima doesn't know what to expect, but he suspects something he won't like. But Tsukishima finds himself taking it in stride. He goes to work. Besides making a note to order books for the annual clearance sale they'll be having in a month or two, and even manages to greet Yachi while he leaves from his shift. Classes go well for him also. He finishes his notes in near record time and even manages to finish the novel he had started almost a month ago. He actively ignores Akateru, who never seems to stop grinning at him as he leaves for his own job. Despite this, it's not as if Hinata has entirely left his life, though Tsukishima hasn't interacted with him for days. It's inconvenient, but he finds Hinata's absence an ever-pressing weight nestled in the back of his mind. Even when the other is gone, it feels like Tsukishima isn't truly rid of him. In a way, it feels almost like relief when he sees Hinata walking in the door, all smiles and casual wear, and carrying a plastic coffee cup, blissfully unaware of the irritation his presence and absence has brought upon Tsukishima. "Hi!" Hinata says by way of greeting and sets the coffee cup on the counter in front of him. Tsukishima smirks at the drink. "What's this?" he asks. Hinata looks at the coffee and then back at Tsukishima with a bit of a confused knit in his brows. "Coffee?" he answers, though it's turned over more as a question. Tsukishima regards it again, his smirk widening to near grin, and says, "Don't think giving me coffee is going to make me spill everything to you about my personal life." Hinata stares at him for a moment, uncomprehending. Then his face twists into a grimace, comprehending. "That's not it!" he exclaims. I'm sorry I've caused you trouble, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I thought the coffee would be a better apology." Hinata then looks at the floor and chuckles nervously. "I'm not very good with words." Something stirs in Tsukishima then, some sort of fluttering awareness at the front of his mind that disperses as soon as he reaches for the cup. "Okay," Tsukishima says, "I'll accept your apology." And then he takes a sip, more instinctive than conscious, and there's a burst of sweet and bitter so strong across his tongue he nearly chokes. "Jesus!" he coughs, forcing down the liquid. "What did you do? Dump an entire sugar container in this?" Hinata snorts softly and grins. "No," he says. "I'm guessing sugar's not your thing? Sorry, I'll remember next time." And then his grin breaks into a sincere smile. "One apology is enough," Tsukishima tells him. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand as he pushes the cup away, wondering if his taste buds are permanently damaged from the syrupy sweet burn. "Thanks anyway," he says roughly. "You're welcome," Hinata says, sounding a little too pleased with himself, as if he's won a victory, though Tsukishima nearly spit the coffee out in his face. But the blonde finds he doesn't mind as Hinata's quieter inside the shop the rest of the time he's there. It's too good to last. Tsukishima knows he's in for something when the door to the shop opens and Hinata isn't the only one who enters. Hinata saunters in as if nothing has changed. He's grinning at Tsukishima, gym bag in hand, wearing a white t-shirt like usual, except he has shorts instead of track pants, and Tsukishima's attention is held more by the individual behind Hinata. He's taller than Hinata, though almost everyone would be tall compared to Hinata, with blonde hair that must be dyed as it contrasts to his dark-colored roots. He's also wearing a similar outfit to Hinata, gym bag and all, except his shorts are red and he's wearing an open faded jacket to match. His stare is also completely glued to his phone. "Oh!" Hinata exclaims, as if he had only just remembered his companion's presence. "This is my friend, Kenma." Tsukishima watches as Kenma lifts his eyes to meet his for about 0.5 seconds before directing them back to his phone. He then raises his hand in a soft greeting. "Hey," he says, or at least that's what Tsukishima thinks he says, as his voice is far away and so soft-spoken that he almost doesn't catch it. With Yachi himself and now Kenma, Tsukishima wonders absent-mindedly if Hinata just has a thing for blondes, but retracts immediately from the implications of that thought. "Hello," he responds by way of greeting. "Why are you here?" he wants to ask, but doesn't, since that would be impolite to someone he's just been introduced to. Instead, he directs the question to Hinata. "Why are you here?" "I'm here all the time," Hinata tells him simply. Tsukishima rolls his eyes and doesn't even try to hide it. "Let me rephrase it then. What do you want from me?" "Who says I want anything from you?" Hinata says, as if Tsukishima can't pick up on his pretend cluelessness with how obvious he's being. He then sighed. "Fine, whatever. If you don't need anything from me, then let me do my work." Tsukishima pretends that he's not still watching Hinata out of the corner of his eye, as the other bites his bottom lip slightly. He looks back at Kenma. Kenma continues to look at his phone screen. "We want you to come with us," Hinata then blurts. At first, Tsukishima is confused. "Go where?" is the question he finds himself giving voice to. That seems to be the wrong answer, because at his question, Hinata's nervousness seems to evaporate, and he smiles at him instead. "We're having a practice, not anything official, just some friends and stuff to play, but we want you to come, please," Hinata says, and then he notices the blank stare lingering on Tsukishima's face. He continues hesitantly, "volleyball practice," as if that is what Tsukishima feels he needs clarification on. But surprisingly, Tsukishima doesn't feel angry or even irritated. No, he feels a sudden panic almost. A tightness seems to seize his chest and his throat, but it vanishes almost as soon as Tsukishima notices it. He swallows and takes in Hinata's wide brown eyes. "We?" Tsukishima asks, but his voice comes out rougher than intended. So what's intended as snark sounds more of an embarrassing choke noise. Hinata seems just as surprised as he is, but he clears his throat and says, "Something tells me it's just you that wants me to go." Hinata blinks and shrugs his shoulders slowly, perhaps surprised that Tsukishima hasn't flat out rejected him yet. "Why do you want me to go, Hinata?" Tsukishima just asks directly. "Because," Hinata admits, "I think you'll have fun. I mean, you don't have to play. You could just watch or..." Tsukishima shuts his eyes for a moment, feeling faint heat on his cheeks, and groans. "Hinata, stop." And when he opens his eyes, he finds Kenma is looking at the scene, but diverts his gaze again when he meets Tsukishima's gaze. "I don't want to play anymore, Hinata. What is it going to take for you to realize that?" "Then tell me why you quit," Hinata demands, with a grim stubbornness Tsukishima couldn't recall him using before. "So much for coffee apologies, huh?" "No," Tsukishima says with a scowl. "Christ, just let it go. It's none of your business." Hinata's mouth twists on a pout, glaring at him, and neither one of them speaks for a beat. It's only broken when Kenma speaks. "I'm going outside, Shouyou," he says, moving efficiently out the door in one smooth motion. Hinata doesn't even move, but just meets Tsukishima glare for glare. "You should go join your friend, because I'm not going," Tsukishima tells him. Hinata then crosses his arms over his chest. "I don't get why you're being such a jerk about this." "I'm always a jerk. It's who I am, and it's who I've always been." "You are not," the redhead counters with so much certainty Tsukishima might have even believed him. "If you were, Yamaguchi would never have befriended you." Tsukishima almost laughs. "Yamaguchi is friends with me despite me being an asshole, and just because you're friends with him doesn't mean you know me, or that I want to be friends with you." They both seem to stand stunned into silence, and Tsukishima notes how fast his heart is beating against his chest as his words sink in. Then, "Okay," Hinata breathes, blinking quickly out of his daze, and then swallows thickly. Okay, he repeats. Hinata leaves the store and doesn't look back behind him. Tsukishima should feel satisfied. He's not. Chapter 4. Reflection. Akiteru isn't home when Tsukishima is. Unfortunately, this means it's also quiet enough for Tsukishima to be alone with his thoughts, and that is possibly the last thing he wants to do at the moment. He doesn't even have any new books in his bag, and an essay on an uninteresting topic would be too monotonous to fully grasp his attention. He opts for just laying on his bed with his headphones on and his full library on shuffle. He tries not to go through the events of the day, tries not to backpedal through his conversation with Hinata, or think about how the frustrated crease between Hinata's eyebrows melting into shock and hurt at his words. He tries not to feel like a shitty human being. It's over 100 songs later that Tsukishima falls asleep. Tsukishima is already in a bad mood by the time Kageyama Tobio approaches him. Having fallen asleep with his music player having been playing during the night left Tsukishima with no choice but to leave it to charge when he left for work. That had left him with his phone to listen to on the train, but it also meant that he couldn't listen to music while working to save battery for the trip home, leaving him in silence. It didn't help that his mood was still sour from the day before, and as if with the majority of mornings, no one came in. Most of Tsukishima's morning consisted of trying to find books to borrow to replace the ones he'd put back, but he couldn't seem to find anything that truly interesting. He ended up tossing one in his bag and simply opening up to random passages in another and selecting the most interesting one. There was also a box in the back he had to open, but it only consisted of dictionaries, lame-looking light novels, and one book that was ordered specifically for a customer, surprisingly enough. It was so boring that Tsukishima had even considered calling up someone else to take his place. However, he doubted any of them would answer his call, and even if they did, he doubted they would even want to and give him some lame excuse instead. The one he could think would be most likely to agree would be Yachi, but then he remembered that Yachi and Hinata were acquainted with each other and he abandoned the idea. So when someone did walk in, it was almost a relief. But then Tsukishima sees the expression on the other's face, has a daunting realization as he recognizes who he is, and the relief becomes more foreboding as he knows this is not going to end well. Kageyama is wearing an expression between a frown and a glare, as if someone has pissed in his cereal. Tsukishima smirks at the image that thought invokes. He's almost grateful to Hinata for talking long hours about his days at Karasuno after Tsukishima had left, as he probably wouldn't have recognized Kageyama the same as he had Hinata. That is to say, not at all. But he does, and he can only imagine what the other wants to talk about. The memories that Tsukishima recalls are not all that different than what he sees in front of him. Though Kageyama isn't dressed like he's about to play volleyball, he still carries himself with an air that one might imagine with the title of King of the Court. But he also seems different than Tsukishima remembers, and the disconnect between memories and the person standing in front of him is quite annoying. Kageyama approaches the counter. "You're Tsukishima," he says. And it's not really a question, but Tsukishima answers as such. "Yes, and you're Kageyama." Kageyama blinks in surprise at the recognition, but continues. "Look, I'm Hinata's friend, so I know he can get annoying." At this, Tsukishima snorts softly. "But you could have handled him better. He thinks of you as a friend." Tsukishima can feel his face heating up. "We're not friends. He barely knows me, and I barely know him." "You just talk to him." "I don't want to talk to him." Kageyama's frown deepens and his voice goes low with barely restrained irritation. "You're difficult." The corner of Tsukishima's mouth quirks up in a slight smirk. It's a living. And whatever civility was between them then disintegrates. Kageyama's eyes flash with anger, and Tsukishima feels like he's 15 again. "Fuck you." The other snarls, and with that he's stomping his way out of the store. The exchange was short, and there's no real release for the anticipation of an argument he'd felt clawing at his throat. Instead, it leaves a bitter taste in his mouth. Tsukishima sighs, rolling over onto his stomach and stretching his legs over the side of the bed, phone in hand. He feels not himself, even though he's in his own room alone on his day off, his element. Despite how perfect the atmosphere should be for his mood, it hasn't improved since his fight with Hinata, and might have even worsened since his confrontation with Kageyama. Now, if there's anything that makes Tsukishima more irritated than others' stupidity, it's wallowing in his own emotions and being unable to make sense of them. Usually, when such feelings arrive, he simply ignores them until it becomes impossible to do so, and it feels like that time is now. But of course, it takes him forever to do so. He'd taken out a book and had attempted to read, but unable to focus past one page. After rereading the second line for the fourth time, he tossed it back into his bag and reached for his phone. Tsukishima took off his glasses, his face buried into crossed arms as the phone is held between his neck and shoulder as it rings. "Hello? Tsuki?" Tsukishima doesn't really give a greeting outside of an irritated groan. There's a soft chuckle and a shift in sound as Tsukishima can imagine Yamaguchi sitting up on his bed, brushing aside a textbook as he focuses his full attention on the call. "Something's up, isn't it?" he asks. "You never call." There's a pause before Tsukishima finally lifts his head up and murmurs, "I'm an asshole." Yamaguchi makes an amused sound. It must be bad if you're admitting it out loud to me." "Yeah, sure," he answers back. Yamaguchi chuckles softly, but not in a way that makes Tsukishima feel like he's being made fun of. Then he says, "I think I may know what it's about." Tsukishima's brows furrow in confusion as he rolls onto his back, now facing the ceiling, his arm angled up to press the phone into his ear. "What?" There's a pause as if Yamaguchi is actually considering not telling him. "This is about your fight with Hinata, right?" Tsukishima takes a deep breath and lets it out with a groan. Well, if he told Kageyama about it, then he might have told the entire goddamn world about it. Did he call it a fight? It's a stupid thing to ask, as what does Tsukishima care if he does? Hasn't he been calling it that himself? Well, actually, Yamaguchi starts hesitantly. It wasn't Hinata who told me. Tsukishima doesn't even ask, as if it's quite obvious. But the realization does nothing to improve his outlook on the current situation. There's another shift on the other end of the line before Yamaguchi speaks, amusement on his tongue. "You know, you really should stop picking fights with our old teammates." Tsukishima would like to point out that they weren't really his teammates to begin with, but doesn't, and instead asks, "So am I going to have to defend myself against the whole horde of volleyball-obsessed individuals?" Honestly, from what I can tell, Hinata only told Kageyama what happened between you two, and Kageyama only told me and a few others what happened after he claimed that he tried to confront you, and you were, and I'm quoting here, a total fucking asshole to him. Also, I believe you spooked Kenma. "Yeah, that sounds about right," Tsukishima muses wryly. But there's not an answering chuckle on the other end of the line, just silence, and then, "Are you going to tell me what happened?" Tsukishima huffs into the phone. "I was an asshole." "You mentioned that," his friend laughs. "But why were you an asshole when you knew it was going to bother you later?" "I didn't know." He's quick to respond. "Hinata was annoying, and I snapped at him like I always do." "Come on, Tsuki. Something must have been different if he went and told Kageyama about it and not me. He knew it was going to come to this. It's not like he was avoiding it for any other reason." "He was trying to get me to play volleyball." The burst of laughter is so sudden, Tsukishima actually jolts, fumbling his phone as he sits up and presses it back to his ear. "Really, Tsuki? You still hate volleyball that much?" "Oh, shut up." Tsukishima groans as hearing Yamaguchi take it so lightly makes him feel like he's been agitated over nothing. "I don't hate it." "Then why did you get so angry at Hinata or whatever?" "He was trying to get me to play with him, and play after I'd already said no." Tsukishima explains, pushing his glasses up to rub his eyes, more out of his slight frustration. It was just irritating, and he kept wanting to know why. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Yeah, Hinata can be a little overbearing, Yamaguchi admits. But now you feel like an ass for getting angry at him. Tsukishima doesn't answer, and the other continues. So why don't you just apologize? I don't think he's ever going to come back of his own free will again. Do you want me to give you his number? Yamaguchi asks. God, no. Tsukishima huffs. So you want me to ask him to meet up with you? There's a smile in his voice. That would be ideal, yeah. Tsukishima says, voice low, and really, could he be any more pathetic? Okay, don't worry, I got your back, Yamaguchi promises. I'm actually kind of glad you're trying to put in some effort yourself, finally. Hinata really seemed to be struggling. Something heavy drops in Tsukishima's stomach. Did you talk to him about me? He asks, incredulous. Well, yeah, Tsukishima replies teasingly. I am your ultimate wingman, right? Goodbye, Tadashi. He growls as if trying to turn the other's name into an insult, but hangs up before a laugh can echo through his phone speaker and throws the device down on his bed. He was most definitely not pouting. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for these 2 chapters. Hopefully by this point I've kind of figured out the voices and stuff. I know I said I was struggling a little bit with them in the first one, but I think I've got them. I think I kind of figured out how I want to do their voices, and I hope that you're really enjoying this one. We'll see how many people are actually listening to this one. I know that Tsukihina is more of a rare pair, and Haikyu is not like a super popular one for PODFICs, so we'll see how many of you are out there are loving this one. If you do come back and join me again, I'll see you next time.